Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us here on the network where we cover the most interesting live trials and legal stories in the news today. We are going to be live in two big trials and also in Verdict Watch in two other major cases. So you know what I'm going to say? Let's break it all down. And somebody's joining me who I haven't had an opportunity to speak with about this verdict since we heard it. Forensics professor from Jacksonville State University, Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, good morning to you. It's great to see you as always.
Hey, buddy. Good to see you as well.
Now, I got to ask, we haven't had an opportunity to talk about the verdict. What's your reaction?
Not surprised. And at a visceral level, I'm pleased. Justice was done. We'll see how much justice is meted out in this particular case. I never bought this idea of insanity, Jesse.
Yeah, and a lot of people didn't, and understandably so. I just got to ask you, though, as we're watching this, and you know, you've covered a lot of different heinous crimes committed against children, but if you were sitting here trying to determine if the death penalty is justified, how would this case rank up against other ones?
It's at the top of the heap, Jesse, and that's because of the planning that went into it. And that's kind of my litmus test for any of these capital events that occur. You know, how much planning went into this. It's one time, you know, it's one thing when I was an undergraduate, I was learning law at an undergraduate level in Louisiana. I love this term, the heating and cooling of blood. It's an old term, you know, that goes back years and years.
Right.
This idea, you know, was this done as a crime of passion? And it was not. Maybe that first child that he alluded to that was killed was done in a passionate manner. However, these other children, these kids, this was something that was planned. He made lists up. He drove around. He looked for a place to literally sequester these bodies out of sight, Jesse. That gives me an idea. He was looking to flee. So he's not some madman wandering down the street screaming at the heavens. This guy is plotting this.
That's very well said. And it sounds just like what we heard from the prosecution in their closing argument. Let's play a little bit of that right now. Okay, Joseph, back to you. What can we expect today? I mean, what do you think we're going to see on the part of the defense to argue that, well, yes, a jury came back. Jury, we understand, we respect your decision, but there's some other things you need to consider about the defendant before you you make a decision on imposing the death penalty. I mean, what can they argue here? That he was an overworked father? That he does? I mean, they don't believe that he suffers from a mental illness. Their decision clearly stated they do not believe he had a mental illness because they had an option here to find him guilty but mentally ill, and they didn't go that route. They just said not guilty. So what's the defense going to do here, you think?
They'll flee to this idea of the crushing waves of anxiety he was suffering throughout his life, and they'll talk about all of the pressure he was under. This poor man, you know, saddled with these 5 children, which is, in my estimation, a completely different route that we could go down. I think there's a little blood on the hands of family courts here, and you know they'll talk about this. And I don't know, Jesse. I don't know how you go about painting this guy in in a positive light, not even a positive light, but just to kind of rehabilitate who he is, sitting there, with these guilty verdicts hanging over his head, and the idea, everything that they have seen in this court, Jesse, the graphic nature of this. I've been on scenes like this, and it is absolutely horrific. And people in the jury and even the court, it's one of these events that shocks the conscience of the court. They're not going to be able to get past that in the sentencing phase. The defense they've got a hell of an uphill struggle with this.
The counter argument to that is even in the most egregious cases, even in the most horrific cases, sometimes people are surprised when the jury cannot make a decision on the death penalty because they still are looking at a human being, even though it's difficult to classify him as that.
Yeah, it is very difficult, and I think that's one of the touchstone here, isn't it? You know, when I've never been a jury member by virtue of what I've done for a living my entire life, but I can only imagine, you know, when you're thinking about taking somebody's life at the end of the day, and the argument will probably be put forward, well, 5 have already died. Is there a need for one more? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this measures up against state statute. how this is presented. Are they going to be able to make a balanced decision back in that jury room? It'll be interesting to watch. We'll see how quickly they eventually come back.
Yeah, I'm also waiting to see if the defendant were to make a statement as well. I don't know. We'll have to see. It's going to be one to watch, and that's just, again, one of our main live trials that we're going to be focusing on today. There's a lot that we're covering, including verdict watch and 2 big cases. It's time to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to jump into everything we're discussing here on Law and Crime.